Greetings. I am Beth Alling, President of the Quebec Labrador Foundation. Welcome to Season 3, Episode 1 of QLF's webinar series, Voices of QLF. We are especially pleased that you've joined us for a conversation with 5 QLF alumni who have embarked on their career in the field of conservation and environmental leadership. Before we get started, together with QLF's governing boards and staff, I extend our empathy to our friends, alumni, and the communities across Atlantic Canada that have endured the fury and devastation of Hurricane Fiona. For those wishing to provide emergency relief for these communities, please consider a donation to the Canadian Red Cross. Over the next 30 days, your contribution will be matched dollar for dollar by the Government of Canada. Now let's get started. Today, across the globe, communities and nations step up their response to the climate crisis, and that includes building organizational capacity and human capacity to mount a meaningful campaign for change. In our session today, we will hear from 5 alumni who represent a generation of environmentally minded professionals who join the ranks of those dedicated to the conservation and stewardship of the world's natural resources and also the pursuit of environmental justice. And now may I ask our panelists to unmute your video and audio. It is a great pleasure and honor to introduce our alumni. Lisa Andrews is a scientific researcher for the KWR Water Research Institute. Although her organization is based in the Netherlands, Lisa lives in Germany, where she joins us today. Thierry Grandmont is a Ph.D. candidate in biology at Laval University in Quebec, Canada. Adrienne Kotler is the Officer of Communications and Member Relations for ICLEI Europe. Adrienne lives in Germany. Michael Meneses is a Ph.D. candidate in applied economics from Cornell University in Ithaca, New York. He joins us from Atlanta, Georgia. Grace Weatherall is a climate and clean power attorney with the Environmental Defense Fund in Washington, D.C. Grace joins us from D.C. Our panelists today, we've named young professionals, have worked with QLF over a number of years, first as interns on assignment across our home region. Most have joined the QLF staff in Montreal and Ipswich, and each has served as a consultant on regional and global programs. 3 have attended the QLF Congress in Barcelona in 2016, and 1 is a member of the QLF Council and Advisory Board. Their programmatic contributions to QLF are significant and have a lasting impact and relevance today. And now for our first discussion, let's talk about your QLF experience and briefly share the value of your experience and the impact on your life and career decisions. And I'd like to start with you, Michael.
Hi, Beth. Thanks so much for having me. So I joined QLF in the winter of 2015. I graduated from Brown University in the Environmental Studies program, in their undergraduate program in the spring of 2014. And QLF was it was kind of my first big break. It was my first professional opportunity in the field of conservation and environmental stewardship. Off the bat at QLF, I got huge amounts of responsibility in terms of developing program work. So that winter, I was working on kind of the formulation of the global leadership network, kind of putting ideas down on paper and figuring out how to best communicate the concept. And I also worked on the brand standards, or the QLF's brand standards. And kind of my takeaway of the experience was I really learned how much I enjoyed what I perceived as being real entrepreneurship that it took to do the job effectively, to kind of take ideas from initial conception and to figure out how you're going to make them happen in the real world. And that's something that I continue to look for in my professional life today and hopefully in the future too. Thank you, Rob.
Oh, thank you. And Adrienne, let's hear from you.
Yeah, sure. I actually joined QLF just moments after Michael left. So I think that you can sort of see a bit of a through line from what he just said to my experience. I worked at QLF full-time from April 2015 until September 2016. And then I stayed on as a consultant for a few years, kind of dropping in and out to help out with the Congress and with a few board meetings and white papers and things like that. And yeah, similarly, I think that one of the really formative things for me about being at QLF was that I was young when I started there. I'd only just finished my undergraduate degree and I was still kind of finding my footing. And yet QLF really put a lot of trust, I think, in young professionals and gave me a real opportunity to try to sort of make my own way and have my say and really learn about how the organization worked. So during that time, especially while I was there full time from 2015 through to 2016 was right when the Global Leadership Network was becoming much more formalized. And we were taking this community that had formed very organically and trying to actually put it on paper. So a lot of the work that I was doing was stuff like interviewing alumni to hear, well, firstly to tell their stories, but also to hear from them what they wanted from something like a formal alumni network. And then also planning the Congress in 2016, which was a huge part of my job and a very fun and joyful part of my job too.
All right, thank you. And Thierry.
Yes, well, I started with QLF in the summer 2018 and then 2019 as well. I was in the Biodiversity Conservation and Education program in Newfoundland and Labrador. And at first, I really joined QLF because of the bird aspect, because I'm a bird watcher and all. And during the program, we just do a lot of visiting in schools and, talking with kids and doing some outreach. And I really fell in love with the communication aspect of the whole thing. I really love to share my love for nature and, raise awareness among the youth. And I think that's really how QLF really guided me towards more of an outreach aspect in my career. And I'm really grateful for that.
Thanks, Thierry. And Lisa.
Thanks, Beth, and thanks for having me. So my journey at QLF also started a bit similarly, that I found out first about QLF at a McGill University career fair, where I met one of the local Montreal staff there, which was François Guillet. And so I met him and he was talking about the conservation and the different work and environmental storytelling that they were doing at QLF at that time. And so a classmate of mine, Belinda Alfano, who is also, I think, attending this webinar today, both of us started joining at QLF to volunteer there, and we were working on the kind of storytelling, conservation, and environmental aspects of it. And I really enjoyed that because we put all of our heads together at the QLF Montreal office, which was very small, I think just us three at that time, and put all of our strengths and passions together for environmental conservation and storytelling. And as some of the other young professionals have said, QLF really did embrace, empowering us to do what we thought would be nice ideas to host more environmental conservation communications and activities. And so Francois and I actually kind of started up some local Montreal guided tours that were ongoing. And we, together with Francois, we kind of also amped up the environmental side and conservation side and awareness raising at some of those local events as well. So that was really enriching for me. And then I also worked there while Adrienne was there as well, and where we were also kind of building up the leadership network and doing the alumni interviews, which I also found very interesting to talk to all of the people that QLF has touched globally, not just locally in Montreal. And so I think the one thing for me that I really took away from my time at QLF and also being involved at the Congress in Barcelona is that the power of QLF is in the community and in the collaboration and the relationships that have been built. And I really noticed that even more in person at the Congress, that QLF is one big family of conservationists. And that was one thing that I took away, that it's all about people. And if you can empower people to take action, then that's at the heart of everything. So that for me was my main takeaway of QLF in my time there. And it has now been a part of my career path moving forward. So yeah.
And Grace, we'd like to hear from you.
Thanks so much, Beth. Hi, everyone. I started out at QLF the summer after my freshman year at Williams College. I was working in the Ipswich office and working on, there I am with the Congress, working on organizing the Sounds Conservancy program and making sure that we were keeping good track of how the all of the programs that QLF maintains was kept well in mind. And just like while I was at QLF then, and then again the next summer I helped it again and managed to stay in touch. And especially when I attended the Congress, pictured here with some familiar faces, including our friend Charlie. I was really struck by not only the incredible work that QLF is doing and that I was helping to sort of maintain records of, but also just the really incredible breadth of experience and passion and geographic diversity of the people that have been a part of QLF through the years and continue to be. And, you know, I know that the organization has really grown and evolved in such an impressive way. And I think I've been particularly struck by that, so the community focus of the organization, that community environmental passion shared by everyone involved, and just the really impressive expertise and array of people who are part of QLF and care so much about it. So I think sort of two things really have struck me particularly. One is, you know, the massive breadth of experience and expertise among QLF alumni, which is impressive for any organization, especially one that, you know, is relatively small, but now has such a huge international reach. And the second is just the sort of, I think, uniquely familial and inclusive environment and energy that QLF really espouses. I think it makes a huge difference. Somehow the organization is able to both be so familial and also reach outward to people and groups, you know, across the world. And that's, I think there's a reason why everyone is so loyal and keeps coming back to spend time both in person and virtually.
Thanks so much. Now let's talk about your organization, your studies, and your work. And please share a story about a special project or aspect of your work you see as being meaningful and rewarding. And Thierry, I'd like to start with you.
Yes, certainly. Well, right now I'm just in the middle of between finishing my master's and starting a PhD. And I finished my master's. I was studying snow geese and how climate change has impacted their migration and their reproduction. And basically, because of COVID, I haven't had the chance to go in the Arctic for my master's fieldwork. But this last summer, I went to help as part of a long-term survey for the snow geese. And it was kind of crazy because I was studying their reproduction, it was crazy to finally see the geese in their habitat, you know, and lay their eggs. And that was such an amazing experience to be able to witness that. And overall, during my master's, I found that snow geese are, interestingly, not that much impacted by climate change as of right now. With the data that I was using, basically we didn't see much of a change. However, we see that the geese really use the winds and the environmental condition around them. So we see that maybe in the future, if climate change keeps going, they will be impacted eventually. So that's for what I've done for my master's, and now going into my PhD, I'm going to be studying the effect of recreation on biodiversity in the Quebec's provincial parks. So I'm really excited for that because it has a really kind of a hands-on aspect where we could change regulations and stuff like that for the national parks in Quebec. So I'm really excited about that. I'm going to be starting in January. So right now I'm just kind of an in-between period that's kind of awkward, but really excited for my next project.
Wonderful. So Lisa, could we hear from you?
Sure, thanks. Yeah, it's nice to hear the kind of similarities between our experiences and current work life. Yeah, so I'm originally from Montreal, but as Beth mentioned, I'm currently living in Germany and working for a Dutch water research institute. So quite all over the place. But yeah, basically my career path has been that from working in studying in Montreal in environmental studies, I then wanted to get into a bit more narrow down my focus of environment and development and international studies to a focus. And so then I chose water. What I quickly realized is that water touches upon everything, whether it's climate related, conservation related as well. So I didn't really narrow down my focus that much, but what I realized when I was working in water and doing my master's at McGill on integrated water resources management, that the kind of red thread and what I really enjoyed doing was bringing people together to find a shared vision towards developing any kind of climate action or water conservation or environmental protection work. And so that's kind of been the red thread throughout my career now, 6 or 7 years after graduating from McGill University. I've been working in international organizations doing just that. So bringing different world and water sector leaders together to co-create water sector visions for climate adaptive and water sensitive cities. And so I did that at the International Water Association for a few years, and then I did some consulting. And now for the last 2 years, I've been working at the KWR Water Research Institute. And there I've kind of joined now the ranks of the academics, which is very new to me. And so at the beginning, I was kind of trying to find my place, and I was still joining KWR and this research institute as the person who knew how to connect people. And now what's really exciting in this last year is actually that with those strengths and experiences that I've gained over my career, I was offered to do a PhD within a European project and at Utrecht University in the Netherlands, just on studying stakeholder engagement and impact in research projects in the domain of climate change. So I'm also in this awkward middle phase like Thierry right now, where I've been like brainstorming my PhD and what I'm going to look at over the last year. And I'm working now with my supervisors on really finding my narrative, but I'm really excited because at KWR, my PhD will be very practical as well. So as the fact that my PhD is embedded within a European project that's funded by the European Commission, as well as partnering with the university, I will have a lot of practical applications and empirical data to draw upon. So I'm really happy about that as well. So yeah, I'll keep you all posted on how my academic entry goes.
Well, that's a nice segue back to Grace.
Gosh, I don't know. I'm certainly not an academic, but I did get a graduate degree. So I after QLF, well, actually, there is no after QLF. I'm still a part of QLF, and in fact, I worked as a consultant for QLF in the year before I began law school in 2018. I graduated law school in 2021. When I went, I was really dedicated to getting my JD so that I could work in climate change. And that's what I have done. I now am an attorney at the Environmental Defense Fund. It's a lot of acronyms, so I'm worried that I'm going to say the wrong acronym, but EDF, Environmental Defense Fund in Washington, DC, where I focus currently on power plant pollution and working on the transition to a clean energy grid in the coming decades. It's focused on the United States, specifically domestic pollution, because the United States is a big problem, and because, it all has to do with the various statutes at play governing climate emissions. We recently passed an exciting new statute. The Inflation Reduction Act doesn't sound exciting, but it is exciting, I promise. Lots of money in there for renewable energy. Yay. And so I'm playing a big part in at EDF and thinking about how we want to make sure that the power sector takes advantage of those tax incentives. We're filing something today that I can't actually confirm with you, but I can let you all know later what it is, pushing EPA to take action. And I am just really grateful to be here. I'm learning a ton, love my coworkers. I think the theme that began for me at QLF and continues to be true is that people who work professionally in environmental work tend to be great people. And it's the same. It's the same everywhere. Yeah, so really happy to be doing, what I've always dreamed of doing. And I'll pause there.
Thank you so much. And Michael, let's hear from you.
Yeah, tough acts to follow, but I'll try. Yeah, so after QLF, I went into the research industry. So first at economic and social policy consulting firm called Apt Associates, based out of Cambridge, Massachusetts. And my idea in making that switch was that while I knew that I wanted to continue engaging in environmental activism and in conservation, I also felt that I didn't quite know enough about the problems yet, and I wanted to gain a little bit more expertise. And so I wanted to enroll in a PhD program and started taking steps towards that direction. Today, I'm a PhD candidate at Cornell University. The program is based out of Ithaca, New York. I'm currently based out of Atlanta, Georgia, working remotely. But the program is in applied economics, and my focus is generally in resource management and agricultural economics as well. I would say that my research interests and what I spend a lot of my days thinking about these days have to do with how do we manage resources sustainably. And so I think the questions that I either am considering or see myself considering in the near future kind of touch both ends of the economy from cradle to grave. So I think about issues of resource extraction and then also waste management on the other end of the economy, and thinking about how do we balance these two things to improve sustainability. Right now, I'm working in particular on a project in agricultural economics, where we're looking at farmers' use of pesticides and how they're loading the soils with pesticides and synthetic fertilizers, and how improving information around what's happening inside soils. So with soil microbiomes and how soil microbiomes respond to these synthetic chemicals, how that improving information around that might change farmers' decisions around using these synthetic compounds. And so I guess big picture, this is really about improving how we manage our soils, which is kind of where, at least in my opinion, kind of where our economy starts, right? Because without soils, there's no food, and without food, there's nothing else after that. So that's kind of what I'm doing now. And yeah, I'm not sure if this will take me down the route of continued research in academia, or I could also see myself applying these skill sets either at an NGO or at a firm looking to improve sustainability in the private sector. So that's kind of me.
Great. Well, there's always QLF.
As well, yeah.
And Adrienne, we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, it's interesting. My job, I think, on paper is totally different from the four of you who've already spoken, and yet it was quite funny to hear how many interlinkages there are with what you've described. So I work, as Beth said, I'm based in Germany, and I work for it's this organization called ICLEI, and it's a global network of cities. We have over 2,500 cities that are part of this network that are all committed to sustainability. And I work specifically at the European Secretariat. So we work with a few hundred European cities that are all members of this network. And that involves a few different components. On the one hand, we implement projects with cities. So as Lisa mentioned, it's a really different landscape in Europe because of the European Commission. The European Commission has a whole ton of different funding streams, and the one that we are most connected to are the Horizon streams, so Horizon 2020, Horizon Europe. And they will fund, 3 to 5 year projects for us, ICLEI as an organization, to work with partners and with cities to implement concrete sustainability projects. So I work in a few urban mobility projects where we're trying to help cities to make public transit more accessible, to improve bicycle infrastructure, things like that. I also work on a few energy projects. One of them, similar to what Grace was describing, is about coal regions in transition and trying to get coal regions onto renewable energies in a way that works closely with, like labor unions and with the communities who are going to be impacted. And I also worked on another energy project that was about more kind of innovative things that we haven't thought about. So for example, we worked with a city in Belgium that was trying to get more energy efficient appliances in households, but acknowledging that they're very expensive. So they were working on a program whereby the city would buy energy efficient appliances and then rent them out to vulnerable and low income communities and households. So it's really very diverse, the kind of projects that I work on there. I personally work on all European funded projects. So that's the one big component of ICLEI's work, and that's where I focus most of my efforts. But then the other component is that since we are this really big network of cities, we also play an advocacy role. So that's something I've also contributed to. We actually just put out an article recently about sustainable food procurement at the European level. So we represent local governments at the UN, at all the COPs, and then we also have a role at the European level with the European Union doing advocacy and strategy. So yeah, it's my job there. My title is communications and member relations with a focus on stakeholder engagement, which I think is a way of saying that I do a little bit of everything. I have a very broad title. I don't have any one topic or one project that I really am focused on, but I try to keep a bit of a kind of higher level overview and help out across a bunch of different streams, doing mostly communications work, which actually I think, again, builds a lot on what I did at QLF. It's a lot of interviews, talking to people about their needs, facilitating workshops, getting people together. And I help organize several different events and conferences to just bring stakeholders together. So it's really a lot of the same skills that I practiced at QLF, just now working with cities as opposed to working with researchers in rural communities.
Thanks so much. And now our last discussion. Today's world is complex, and at times our lives are consumed with the climate crisis, and that can be overwhelming. Where do you find hope in your work? And where do you find hope for the future of natural resource conservation and environmental justice? Let's start with Thierry.
Yeah, that's a good question that I was really looking forward to, because I feel like, nowadays, I don't know, like the news and everything, and sometimes it can be a little bit hard to take in. But I find it so exciting at the same time to see so many, like just in this webinar, to see so many people working on so many different aspects. And sometimes, you're just working on your little, very specific research project, and you only see like a very narrow aspect, and you looking at the big picture, it's something, but at the same time, like, we're not alone. And I realize, we all have our strengths, and we kind of like know how to use them appropriately, I think. And yeah, it's exciting to just know that so many people are working in conservation and in different ways, contributing into making, concrete changes. And I think that's what's very motivating, to see how we can each impact our little community or our little, circle, and do our part. And in the big picture overall, even if we don't see it when we're working, we do make a change, I believe. And that's really what's motivating me.
Thanks so much, Thierry. And Lisa.
Yeah, I was kind of hoping I wouldn't be next because I couldn't add, I don't know what to add on to what Thierry said, because it's true. I was just thinking that, wow, it's so nice to be in such a webinar with so many young professionals and others who are maybe more experienced professionals in the audience and who that are working on that. So I agree completely that it's nice to get into a room and listen to all the different ways we're working on different environmental or climate related work, and through our different capacities and different means, like with Grace putting in different statutes and laws and policies and those types of things. So I think that's really awesome. But yeah, I think what gives me hope is, just remembering the big picture, exactly like Thierry said. I really don't have much to add. So you can circle back maybe. And then, yeah.
All right, and to you, Michael.
Yeah, I think a big part of what gives me hope is seeing kind of this shift away from conservation and environmentalism kind of being relegated to just the realm of activists and community organizers, and really shifting into the realm of the mainstream economy and all different components of that. So I think it's in huge part, and probably entirely, because of the work that activists and organizers like those at QLF have done over the course of decades. But now really what we're seeing is big companies in private industry. Now it's part of their regular conversation. What are we doing to be more sustainable? How are we going to reach carbon neutrality by 2050? And you see it in academia too, where I currently am, where the field of environmental economics used to be kind of this very niche thing. It's now a major component of many economics programs. And so what gives me hope, I think, is that we're now seeing everyone come around to the fact that conservation and kind of wise stewardship of our resources is a very important set of issues, and not just a set of issues that only kind of out there activists need to be worrying about. And so I think that that's kind of what gives me a lot of hope for the future of conservation and stewardship.
Thanks so much. And Adrienne.
Yeah, I actually had one answer, but then Michael's answer kind of led me to a second as well, I have to say, so I might share two. So first, building on what Michael said, I think that very much something that gives me hope is thinking about how quickly things have changed. I remember very clearly, I'm from Toronto, and there was a Canadian election when I was in high school where the Liberal Party lost massively, mainly because they suggested a carbon tax, and the country thought a carbon tax was like completely insane. And now, I mean, it's not that many years later, and carbon taxes are considered to be like a completely standard thing that you have to learn about and apply and consider. And I think that's just a really remarkable change in just a few years. And pretty frequently, I get very cynical about climate change, and I get very pessimistic. And I find it helpful to remember that, we have momentum and things are happening quickly. And then my other original answer before Michael inspired me was that I get a lot of hope from the local level. Mm-hmm. I think that oftentimes when we look internationally at, things like the Paris Agreement and different kind of even national level policies, they never feel like they're enough, and things are very slow, and there's so much politics involved that it can get really, it can get a little bit demoralizing. And I find that whenever you look at the local level, I mean, that's why I'm excited to be working with cities, but I think also at the community local level, at the sub-national regional level, I think that's really where things are happening fast, and they're happening at cities that have no resources, and they're also happening at these massive cities with huge budgets, and they're happening really across the world. And and I find it really helpful to build some optimism, to look at the ways that, I don't know, just last week I was in a fairly small city in the Czech Republic that has like the best public transport connections, or one of the best in all of Europe. And it's just little things like that I think make you realize that things are happening, even if it's not always communicated at the, UN level.
Mhm, mhm.
Thank you so much. And finally, Grace.
Thanks, everybody. Well, okay, I'm gonna see if I can pull off a win-win here, which is you may have noticed me glancing off screen, which is because I'm distracted by emails coming in on something that we're urgently filing today. But that kind of thing, well, two things. First, like tangibly, I feel hope right now, and I can only speak for domestic US climate work in that, we have all these people who are so passionate about the work. We have opportunities that we can seize, especially on addressing the new power sources that are going to roll out, making sure those are renewables and they're not, gas, and making sure that the money available in the statute that we now have helps transition away as well from existing coal. This is kind of boring sounding maybe, but it's exciting. Like the moment is now. We're seizing the moment where we're working with organizations across the states to do this, and that's great. But I think also it's the people. So there's people who have been in this fight for decades, climate and otherwise, including many people on this call, whose names I won't call out, but I'm happy to see you. And then there's young people too, who are, I'm barely even a young person anymore. I mean, I'm sure people would say, shut up, Grace. Yes, you are, but still 15-year-olds in this fight too.
Mhm.
And that's empowering. I'll admit that briefly in the spring of this past year, I had like 48 hours of feeling very depressed about climate change. For the first time since I was maybe 12, when I decided to work in climate change and had a breakdown about climate change, it's like, oh, what are we gonna do? This is terrible. Nothing is happening. EPA is not doing anything. We're being blocked everywhere. The Supreme Court is terrible. But I'm feeling an upswing now. I mean, I think people are recognizing that this is a problem. The kids are worried. The grown-up kids, like us on this call, are worried, and we're working hard. And we're working with fantastic people who've been in the fight for a long time and making friends while we do it. And, that gives me hope. I think we're in a good time with good people. And I'm so grateful for all of the experience that I've had at QLF and beyond. QLF is uniquely wonderful, but also it's part of a theme of good people and environmental work.
Well, you are a great inspiration to us all of you. And you're so articulate and so succinct in your answers that we're ending early. But I thought maybe if you have any other comments you'd like to share with us, or if you have questions for each other.
Oh, yeah, I can bounce back a little bit on what Grace was saying with the young people, and that made me think of my QLF experience. And I think a big part of it that I really loved was working with kids. I didn't know that much that I liked working with kids, but it was such, as you said, like empowering to see just in the span of, an afternoon sometimes, how just by making games, and, explaining a few simple things to kids, they would so quickly like catch on and after that feel like motivated to protect what's around them. That was something that was really like touching to me as well, to see that like I could have such an impact on those kids. That was really really motivating, I think. And yeah,
I think in some ways I had the same experience with the opposite demographic when I was at QLF as well, where I think that when I was starting to think about my career path, it was at a time when working in sustainability was very mainstream, and it was a completely normal thing to tell people that you wanted to work in climate change or sustainability. And in my role at QLF, I got to interview alumni who had worked at QLF, 50 years ago, who were thinking about sustainability and climate change when it was really considered to be kind of a niche thing that only crazy tree huggers were worried about. And I actually found that also really inspiring to hear about the people who noticed that this was an issue and went into it full time before there was a very clear kind of path as there was for me to get into this field. And I also want to say that when Grace refers to grown-up children on the call, I have to assume that that is referencing Larry Morris, who also was one of the people who I got to interview and hear about his path.
Guys, I'm so sorry. 3 separate people are trying to call me. I might have to jump. I love you all. I'm
Good luck,
the
Grace.
reason I'm so busy is because I got to this state of business, which makes me happy because of all of you and Larry, especially Beth. So thank you. This is sad because I wanted the chance to catch up with everyone, but
Good luck, Grace.
Good luck. Good luck.
Yeah. Oh dear. Yeah, I just wanted to add on both, like after hearing what everybody said, I think for me, what makes me also inspired and hopeful is to see these transformations as we've been talking about and what Adrienne's been saying as well, and Michael too, and also Grace as well, and the like aha moments that people are having, like whether they're young or older or whatever. And I think all of these different things really show the different kind of impact you can have. And a few weeks ago, I was at a conference in Copenhagen, and we were really pushing for young professionals to attend this conference from my institute, KWR, because that had never really happened before or been a key goal of KWR to bring young professionals to these conferences. It was more just submit an abstract, you go. So we pushed for that. And one of the young professionals ended up having a networking session or just chit-chatting with some more experienced professional. And they were just talking about her work and what she does. And she works on very specific water quality, chemical, microbiology stuff that I have no idea about. But in the end, she realized that she was talking to the CEO of a water utility in Denmark. And he, after talking to her, was convinced about using her new methodology and is now setting up a partnership with her and my company to apply that methodology. So it's like these little things like that, where I think where you can convince a child to protect their environment, or have these quick aha moments by inspiring someone saying, oh, that could be super useful, or these even bigger transformations, I think, that are taking place. It's all these little like networks and communities of things happening together. And I think that's really what gives me hope as well. And the fact that things are happening at a systems level too, which is really great. So, yeah.
I wanted to jump in again and kind of express almost gratitude. Like I'm so thankful to be entering into this fight at this point in history, where I feel like folks who have been in it for decades kind of really took like the biggest load, right? Like we're trying to move. I mean, we're still trying to move mountains. But at least now everybody gets it. At least everybody like understands, like, yeah, this is important. We need to make some changes to how we run our economy. But 30 years ago, 40 years ago, when people were first identifying these problems, or at least trying to mobilize around these issues, it was so much more an uphill fight, in the sense that the sense that I've gotten is that when you talked about these issues back then, just explaining to folks like why you should care about this, it seemed, so much more difficult today. And so I think that working in this field today has been made so much easier, I think, because of the work that QLF and organizations like QLF have been doing for decades. And I'm really grateful for that. So I think that you guys have made our work a lot easier. I mean, we're still, in a big hole, but I think I would rather be in that hole today than 40 years ago, I think.
Well, we're grateful to all of you. Is that it? Any more remarks, thoughts? This has been, closing arguments. This has been really wonderful. Loved it. Thank you so much. And on behalf of all of us at QLF, I extend my thanks and appreciation to our panelists for participating on this webinar. Thank you, Grace, Michael, Adrienne, Thierry, and Lisa From the start of your work with QLF, you've been an inspiration to all of us, and I always knew your careers held great promise. That is evidenced by your leadership today and your contributions to a common goal greater than yourselves. And finally, a special thanks to our webinar producer, Bill Steelman, webinar host, Hannah Moore in Nova Scotia, and co-host Cassia Foley in Montreal. I hope you join with us for the next webinar on Thursday, November 17th, for a closer look at innovative conservation and stewardship of marine protected areas worldwide. Thank you again for being with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
So much.
Bye.